My name is James, and in this video, I go over 30 CompTIA CySA Plus practice questions written in a similar format to what you should expect to see when you sit for your exam. I will go over each question in detail, pointing out the key phrases and words, and then using the process of elimination on each one to show you how to tackle these types of questions. And for your convenience, I do have timestamps below for each question. So let's go ahead and jump to question 1. All right, question 1. An organization is creating internal policies based on a globally accepted system for securing information assets. Which of the following standards best supports this effort? A. ISO 27001, B. CIS, C. MITRE ATT&CK, or D. OWASP? All right, so let's go ahead and work through this question here. The key phrase is globally accepted system for securing information assets. Now, this suggests a formalized standard or framework that covers information security policies and practices. So let's go ahead and do the process of elimination. We can start with C, MITRE ATT&CK. Now, the MITRE ATT&CK, it's a great resource for understanding attacker behaviors, but it's not a standard for setting up or managing security policies. Next, we can eliminate D, OWASP. And the reason OWASP is incorrect, because this focuses on things like web application vulnerabilities. So it does not apply to this scenario at all. And then finally, we can eliminate B, CIS. And CIS refers to the Center for Internet Security, and that provides benchmark configuration guides. And that leaves us with A, ISO 27001. And this pretty much defines how to establish, implement, maintain, and continuously improve an information security management system. And it's also globally recognized and policy driven. Question 2. A security team is conducting a business impact analysis and wants to use a method that relies on measurable numeric data to estimate risk. Which type of approach should they use? A. Quantitative risk assessment. B. Qualitative risk assessment. C. Risk register. Or D. Operational control. Okay, so the key phrases for this one are going to be measurable and also, I would say, numeric data. All right, this tells you that it's about hard data and calculations. So let's go ahead and do the process of elimination now. And right off the bat, we can start with D, operational control. And this refers to administrative actions like training and procedures. Now, it's important to know that this is a control, not methods of things like risk analysis. Next, we can eliminate C, risk register. And a risk register, that's a tool for tracking and documenting risks, but it doesn't describe the methodology for performing the analysis itself. And finally, we can eliminate B, qualitative risk assessment. Now, it's important to know that qualitative uses subjective scales like high, medium, and low, but not numeric values. And with that said, that leaves us with A, quantitative risk assessment. And out of the list, this is the only one that uses actual measurements and things based on numeric value. Question 3. A threat actor is writing a shell script to take advantage of a discovered flaw on cyberjames.org's public-facing website. Which phase of the cyber kill chain does this activity fall under? A. Actions on objectives. B. Weaponization. C. Exploitation. Or D. C2. All right, so I would say the key phrase for this one is writing a shell script. And this pretty much tells us that the attacker is getting their tools ready, but not executing anything yet. So let's go and do the process of elimination. And we can first eliminate C, exploitation. And this would apply if the script was being ran to actually trigger the vulnerability. But in this scenario, they're just preparing it. They're not using it yet. Next, we can eliminate D, C2. And if you don't know what C2 stands for, that's command and control. This applies when the attacker has already compromised a host and is controlling it remotely. And this hasn't happened yet. And finally, we can eliminate A, actions on objectives. And this is all about completing the mission, right? Such as exfiltrating data, destroying systems, etc. That's way too far down the kill chain for what's being described. So I haven't gotten there yet. And that leaves us with B, weaponization. And this phase involves developing or packaging the payload to be used later. Now, writing a shell script targeting a vulnerability is definitely considered weaponization. Question 4. A threat actor used a load testing tool to overwhelm cyberjames.org's web server, resulting in service disruptions. What type of attack does this represent? A, DOS, B, IP spoofing, C, data exfiltration, or D, SASE? All right, I would say pretty easy one. The key phrase for this question is service disruption. And this is a red flag for something that's, volumetric, flooding, or like chasing a service some way. So let's go ahead and begin the process of elimination. And we can first start with B, IP spoofing. Now, this involves forging the source IP address like in a packet, essentially. Now, it might be used as part of an attack, but it doesn't describe the goal of overwhelming a system. Next, we can eliminate C, data exfiltration. And this is usually, quiet and persistent, right? Nothing here that we know of is being stolen. And the attack is definitely loud and disruptive. And finally, we can eliminate D, SASE, and that stands for Secure Access, Secure Edge. Now, this is a cloud-based network security framework, and it actually helps prevent attacks like this. So it's kind of the complete opposite. And that leaves us with A, DOS, and that is denial of service. Now, this, describes what's happening perfectly, flooding a system until it can't, serve users or serve its purpose for the system. Question 5. James is reviewing outbound traffic from a VLAN used by the marketing department and notices an unusual spike in traffic from one endpoint. What should James do next? A, declare an incident. B, review asset inventory. C, have incident responders investigate. Or D, begin the recovery phase. Okay, so the phrase for this one is unusual spike in outbound traffic. So that's important because it suggests something suspicious is happening, but at this time we're not 100% sure, what is happening yet. So let's go ahead and do the process of elimination here. And we can start with A right off the bat here, declare an incident. Now, this one completely just jumps the gun, right? Without more evidence or validation, declaring a full incident may cause unnecessary, like alarm, resource usage, things like that. Next, we can eliminate D, begin the recovery phase. Now, this might happen, but not next. This is more for after we've identified and contained a confirmed threat, and we're still in the detection and analysis stage right now at this point. And finally, we can eliminate B, review asset inventory. Now, this doesn't deal with the potential threat or, direct the response effort or anything like that at all. So we can just go ahead and eliminate that one. And that leaves us with C, have incident responders investigate. Now, I mean, this is the best move. It initiates deeper analysis and determines whether a real threat exists so that further response phases can be appropriately triggered. Question 6. During an active incident response, a security analyst is reviewing which actions qualify as containment. Which of the following is not a common containment activity? A. Retaining evidence. B. Isolation. C. Removing affected systems. Or D. Network segmentation. All right, so the key phrase here is containment. And I also want to point out just the word not. All right, I feel like a lot of times questions, people don't read what the question's asking. This is asking pretty much what the opposite of a containment is, okay? So if you read the question correctly, it's kind of an easy one. But if you don't read it correctly, you're going to get it wrong. So anyways, let's go ahead and do the process of elimination. And we can start with B, isolation. This is absolutely a containment method, so ruling that one out. Next, we can eliminate C, removing affected systems. This is technically also containment. I mean, you take impacted assets offline to prevent things like lateral movement. And finally, we can eliminate D, network segmentation. This is also containment, right? It's designed to create boundaries between critical systems based on the network. And that leaves us with A, retaining evidence. Now, retaining evidence, that is all about documentation and post-incident analysis. It has nothing to do with containment. Question 7. A website certificate authority needs to invalidate several SSL certificates before they expire. What is the proper way to do this? A. Use DNS to blacklist the certificates. B. Add the certificates to a CRL. C. Configure the firewall ACL. Or D. Modify the certificates trust chain. I do want to point something out here. It does say SSL. Now, in the real world, SSL is deprecated. You most likely will not come across that. However, according to CompTIA, it's still relevant. That's why it's in here. I just want to point that out. TLS replaces SSL. But according to CompTIA, SSL is still important to know, which is why it's in this question. Okay. So the key phrase for this one is invalidate several SSL certifications before they expire. So this points to something being handled by the CA, the Certificate Authority. So let's go ahead and begin the process of elimination now. And we can start with C, configure the firewall ACLs. Now this is completely unrelated and deals with things like traffic filtering, nothing to do with certificate management. Next, we can eliminate A, use DNS to blacklist the certificates. And it's important to know, just right off the bat, DNS does not handle any sort of certificate revocation. And finally, we can eliminate D, modify the security trust chain. Now, trust chains, they validate certs, but you don't alter them to revoke individual ones. And that leaves us with B, add their certificates to a CRL. And CRL, that's short for Certificate Revocation List. And it's pretty much a core component of PKI and the official method for telling systems, a certificate is no longer valid before its expiration. Question 8. A developer just committed a code change to one of the company's applications. The organization uses multiple deployment environments. Which environment will the changes be deployed to first? A, test. B, production. C, development. Or D, QA. All right, I would say this is a tricky one, but let's go ahead and point out the key phrases here. And I would say the first one is committed code. That's important. Well, committed a code, right? And deployment environments. This question is pretty much asking where it goes first in the deployment. And given the scenario, we got to figure that out, okay? So we can start the process of elimination by eliminating B, production. And this is the live environment. You never, ever push untested code straight into production. That would just be a huge risk. Next, we can eliminate A, test. Now, you may have chosen this one, but it's actually the phase that happens after the code is implemented and built. It's not the first stop. And finally, we can eliminate QA, which is D. And QA stands for quality assurance. This phase comes after testing and staging. And QA involves structured testing before approval for release. And that leaves us with C, development. And this is where the code is initially deployed. It's where it's first integrated, built, and tested before being promoted to other stages. Question 9. A private political group targets companies they disagree with by launching a series of DDoS attacks. The group states their intent is to disrupt business operations until the companies change their public stance. What type of threat actor does this group represent? A, hacktivists. B, insider threats. C, OSINT. Or D, organized crime. All right, so without a doubt, I would say the one key phrase that's most important for this one is political group. Okay, so we can go ahead and start the process of elimination by getting rid of B, insider threats. And this refers to somebody inside the organization, which doesn't apply here since the group is acting from the outside. Next, we can eliminate C, OSINT. And this stands for open source intelligence, which is a technique or source. It is not a type of attacker or a group. And finally, we can eliminate D, organized crime. Now, this usually involves financially motivated actors who do things such as steal, extort, or launder money, but not political disruption. And that leaves us with A, hacktivists. And these are actors who use hacking as a form of protest or activism. And it's often, politically or socially driven. Question 10. A security analyst is gathering threat intelligence from publicly available sources. Which of the following is an example of an OSINT source? A, government bulletins. B, closed threat intelligence feed. C, APTs. Or D, security camera footage. Okay. The key phrase here is publicly available. Okay. We're looking for a source that is publicly, available or accessible and provides threat intelligence. So let's go ahead and go through the process of elimination, and we can first start with D, security camera footage. And this is, private physical surveillance. It's not cyber threat intel and definitely not open source. Next, we can eliminate C, APTs. And APTs, that stands for Advanced Persistent Threats. And these are, threat actors. They're not sources. So they're bad people. And finally, we can eliminate B, closed threat intelligence feed. Now, these might offer, great data, but they're not open source. They're not public. And they usually require something like a subscription or a membership to obtain the data from them. And that leaves us with A, government bulletins. And these are publicly posted alerts from agencies like CISA, and they are free to access for all. And real quick, if you're enjoying these types of questions and want to take your studying further, I do have my own practice questions with logs that is live on Udemy right now. There's a total of 290 questions to help you prepare for this exam, and each question has question feedback, so you know exactly why you did or didn't get the question right. If you're interested in supporting me, feel free to check the link in the description or the pinned comment on this video for any active promotions. as I'm always running some. And of course, regardless of if you want to purchase or not, I'll continue to post these free videos right here on YouTube so everyone can benefit from them. All right, let's go ahead and get back to the exam. All right, question 11. A security analyst needs to parse a large security log file for a complex pattern across many lines of data. Which technology offers the best solution for this scenario? A, SQL, B, regex, C, bash, or D, API? Okay, so the key phrase here is, I would say, parse a large log file for a complex pattern. That means we need something designed for pattern recognition in text, right? So let's go ahead and do the process of elimination. We can start right away with eliminating A, SQL. And SQL is good for things like databases, but logs aren't typically stored in structured tables. Next, we can eliminate D, API. And an API, it might help get data depending on what the API is, but it doesn't do the parsing or pattern matching itself. And finally, we can eliminate C, bash. And this is useful for running things like scripts and simple commands, but it still relies on tools, like grep. It's not the best answer for this scenario. And that leaves us with B, regex. And regex, that's short for regular expirations, by the way. And the main purpose here is built for identifying complex patterns in large text files, such as things like logs. That's what regex is designed for. Question 12. A security architect is tasked with implementing operational controls to protect assets at a new office location. Which of the following are examples of operational controls? Select all that apply. A, reviewing user access logs. B, installing endpoint detection software. C, performing regular backups. Or D, creating a data classification policy. Okay, so the key phrase here is just operational controls, right? So which of these are the actions or procedures performed by people to maintain and monitor security, essentially, and that's what an operational control is. So let's go ahead and do the process of elimination. And we can start with B, getting rid of B already, installing endpoint detection software. Now, this is a technical control. It's implemented by tools and technologies, not things like operational routines. Next, we can eliminate D, creating a classification policy. Now, this is more of a managerial control involving documentation and policy. Now, it sets rules, but doesn't enforce or carry them out through, like daily action. And that's key there. So that leaves us with the two answers, which are A, reviewing user access logs, and C, performing regular backups. I mean, A is a hands-on task that helps detect things like weird behavior. And C is a procedural, activity that's carried out to protect against things like data loss and ensure continuity. Question 13. A systems administrator is updating a Windows server in response to a recommendation found in a vulnerability report. This is an example of an activity related to what type of action plan? A, patching. B, risk acceptance. C, security awareness training. Or D, configuration management. All right, pretty easy one if you read the question here. The key phrase here is, I would say, updating a Windows server based on a vulnerability report. That strongly suggests that this is, like a technical fix in response to a known issue. Okay, so we can start the process of elimination by first getting rid of C, security awareness training, right off the bat. Now, this refers to stuff like educating users about threats. It has nothing to do with updating systems or fixing anything. Next, we can eliminate B, risk acceptance. And this involves choosing to do nothing, right, about a vulnerability due to a lot of different reasons, but one could be something like, you know, low impact or something like cost benefit considerations. And finally, we can eliminate D, configuration management. And this deals with maintaining consistent settings and also things like enforcing system baselines. And that leaves us with A, patching. And this refers to applying updates or fixes to resolve things like known vulnerabilities in software or even systems. Question 14. A network administrator wants to find the DNS registrar information and domain creation date for cyberjames.org. What should they do to obtain this information? A. Check a whois server. B. Use NSLOOKUP on the domain. C. Search public breach data for the domain. Or D. Run a trace route to the domain. Okay, so I would say there are two key phrases here. The first one is registrar, and the second is going to be domain creation date. Okay, so let's go do the process of elimination. We can start with C, search public breach data for the domain. Now, this is all about checking for compromised credentials or exposed data. So this one's incorrect. Next, we can eliminate D, run a trace route to the domain. Now, this will show the network path between the local machine that you're on or you run the command from and the target server, so, cyberjames.org, but it won't show any registrar info. And finally, we can eliminate B, use NSLOOKUP on the domain. Now, this will give you some DNS records, such as IP addresses or mail servers, but it won't tell you who registered the domain or when. And that leaves us with A, check a whois server. Now, whois tools, there are some online. They are specifically designed to retrieve domain registration data, including the registrar, creation date, and sometimes even the contact info. Question 15. A security analyst is looking for security configuration benchmarks for Windows 11 computers. What source is most likely to have the information they need? A. Cyber kill chain. B. Diamond model of intrusion analysis. C. CIS website. Or D. TTPs. Okay, so the key phrase for this one is security configuration benchmarks. This means that we are not dealing with attacker behavior, right? We're looking at, more so something like a defensive or system level, let's say, advice. So let's go ahead and do the process elimination. And we can start with A, cyber kill chain. Now, this focuses on how attackers, progress through different phases of an attack. It's useful for things like detection and response, but not for configuration. Next, we can eliminate B, diamond model of intrusion analysis. And this will help analyze adversary behavior by doing things like connecting infrastructure, capability, and even sometimes victims. But it's not related to any sort of like configuration benchmarks. And finally, we can eliminate D, TTPs. And that stands for tactics, techniques, and procedures. This pretty much outlines how adversaries operate, and it's part of threat intelligence, but not system hardening. And that leaves us with C, CIS website. And CIS, that stands for Center for Internet Security, and they publish free benchmarks for Windows and many other platforms, by the way. They're pretty much considered the industry, trusted standards for secure system configuration. So C is the best answer for this scenario. Question 16. An organization is integrating cloud applications with its internal authentication system. It needs a federated identity technology that supports both authentication and authorization across trusted domains. Which of the following would best meet this requirement? A, OAuth, B, SAML or SAML, C, OpenID, or D, IPsec? All right, so the key here is, I would say, federated identity technology that supports both authentication and authorization. So we need a solution that enables users to log in across systems using a shared identity system, and it must support both authentication and authorization, and that's important for this question. So let's go ahead and do the process of elimination. We can start with D, IPsec. Now this is completely unrelated, okay? It's a network protocol used to secure communications at the IP layer, not anything to do with identity management. Next, we can eliminate A, OAuth. And OAuth is focused on authorization only, okay? It grants access tokens for things like APIs, but doesn't handle authentication by itself. And finally, we can eliminate C, OpenID. Now, OpenID does handle authentication and is used in federated systems, but it's mainly about who you are, not what you can do. So it falls short on the authorization side. And that leaves us with B, SAML, which is Security Assertion Markup Language. SAML is built pretty much exactly for this. It enables federated identity across domains and supports both authentication and authorization using things like signed XML assertions. That last part, not required for the exam, but B, SAML, best answer for this question. Question 17. A QA team needs an environment to validate software changes without impacting the environment used by end users. The development environment changes too frequently to meet their needs. What type of software development environment is best suited for the QA team's needs? A, test. B, processing. C, development. Or D, production. All right, so I would say the first key phrase here is validate software changes. And the second is going to be development environment changes too frequently. Yeah, I'd go with that. So, okay, so what's the scenario describing? The QA team wants to validate changes, but not in a place where end users work and not in an environment that's constantly changing. So let's go ahead and do the process of elimination. We can start with D, production. Production is a live environment where users interact with the application, and QA should never do any sort of testing here due to risk, right? Talked about that a little bit earlier. Next, we can eliminate B, processing. And this is pretty much incorrect because it isn't a valid software deployment environment like term in this context, right? It's unrelated to standard dev pipelines, so just a filler word. And finally, we can eliminate C, development. Now, this environment changes often, right? And is used for writing and building code, but it's too unstable for formal QA testing. And that leaves us with A, the test environment. And the test environment, that is designed specifically for validating features and changes in like a controlled setting without affecting any end users. Question 18. A security analyst is reviewing different types of vulnerabilities and needs to determine which would be the hardest to track using a vulnerability management system. Which of the following fits this description? A, outdated component. B, 0-day. C, critical. Or D, configuration drift. Okay, so if you actually think about this question, it's a pretty easy question. But it also requires you to understand the scenario, right? So the key phrase for this one is just hardest to track. So this implies that we're looking for the hardest type of vulnerability to track using automated tools or standard like vulnerability scanners. So let's go into the process of elimination. We can start with D, configuration drift. And this refers to unexpected system changes over time. Now, while it can introduce vulnerabilities, good configuration management tools can catch this. Next, we can eliminate C, critical. Now, simply put, I mean, this just regards the severity rating of a known vulnerability, right? So think about it. If it's known and rated, it can be tracked. Severity doesn't make it harder to find, right? And finally, we can eliminate A, outdated components. And, this may not be ideal, but if it's a known and documented like incident or vulnerability, most vulnerability scanners can detect it based on software versions. And that leaves us with B, 0-day. Now, these are unknown to vendors and defenders too at the time of exploitation, meaning they won't appear in any CVE databases or vulnerability feeds. So that makes them the hardest to track using conventional tools. Question 19. A security analyst is cloning a live system instead of making an offline copy of the disk. Which of the following is true and most important about creating a live clone? A. It can capture data stored in memory. B. It may affect system performance during the process. C. It risks altering timestamps and other volatile data. D. It reduces the risk of changes to data. All right, so this one is designed to be tricky, right? So the key phrases are live system, offline copy, and I would say true and most important. So like right in the question. Now the question asks for what is true and most important about live cloning, not just any side effect, but the main reason why you do it, right? So let's go into the process of elimination. We can start with B. It may affect system performance during the process. Now it's true, right? But not the most important point. Performance impact is a consequence, not a reason to perform live cloning. Next, we can eliminate C. It risks altering timestamps and other volatile data. This is also a risk, but again, it's not a benefit or purpose of the technique. And finally, we can eliminate D. Option D, it reduces the risk of changes to data. Now, a live system is actively changing, so that risk actually increases. So that's incorrect. And that leaves us with A. It can capture data stored in memory. So this is the most important and unique capability of live cloning. Now, RAM contents like active sessions, keys, and running processes, that can only be collected while the system is powered on. And this makes it like the key reason to choose live over offline cloning. Question 20. A security analyst is reviewing structured output from a log file and sees the following format. What type of format is displayed? A. YAML, B. XML, C. CSV, or D. JSON. Okay, so I wanted to include this one because there's a good chance you'll get a question similar to this on the exam, where you need to understand like basic language format or syntax. You don't need to code or anything like that, but you need to be able to like see, oh, that's this type of log file, right? And in the real world, you'll need to know how to read different languages when reviewing logs. It's really important. So the biggest key here is not really a phrase, right? It's just the curly braces. Only one of these have the curly braces. So this one will be quick, but let's go ahead and do the process of elimination. We can first start with CSV. And CSV, that stands for Common Separated Values. And this will just be plain text with commas. Next, we can eliminate A, YAML. And YAML is used for structured data, but it uses things like indentation instead of like curly braces. And finally, we can eliminate B, XML. And XML uses what's called angled brackets, not curly braces. And that leaves us with D, JSON. And JSON is common in things like APIs, logs, and configuration files due to its like simplicity and readability by machines and humans. And it also has curly braces. Question 21. A security analyst is reviewing application data for compliance and needs to identify CHD. Which of the following is an example of CHD? A, billing zip code. B, user password hash. C, credit card expiration date. Or D, security question answer. All right, so I will tell you that this one is really hard if you don't know what CHD stands for. I'll just tell you it's cardholder data. That probably just gave you the answer. So let's go ahead and do the process of elimination. And CHD is the key word in this one. So either you knew that or you didn't, right? So we can go ahead and start the process of elimination by getting rid of D first, security question answer. Now this is used for identity verification, not anything like financial transactions. Next, we can eliminate B, user password hash. This is related to something like authentication credentials, but nothing to do with cardholder data or like payment card info. And finally, we can eliminate A, billing zip code. Now, this may be sensitive, right? But it's just considered PII according to PCI DSS compliance, not CHD. And that leaves us with C, credit card expiration date. And this is classified as cardholder data under PCI DSS, simply put. So C, credit card expiration date is the answer for this one. Question 22. A network administrator is tasked with segmenting a local network into 6 logically isolated segments. Which of the following steps would best help complete this task? A, create 6 VLANs. B, deploy 6 subdomain DNS zones. C, apply a DMZ configuration. Or D, implement an air gap. Okay, so the key phrase for this one is logically isolated segments. That's important because that means it's not physically separating, right? So let's go ahead and do the process of elimination. And with that said, we can go ahead and start with D, implement an air gap. Now this physically disconnects systems from any network. Now this counts as total isolation, but it's not logical isolation. And it's definitely not scalable for 6 internal segments. Next, we can eliminate C, apply a DMZ configuration. And this is useful for isolating public-facing systems from internal networks, but it won't give you 6, distinct segments internally. And finally, we can eliminate B, deploy 6 subdomain DNS zones. Now, this deals with stuff like organizing names for services, but it doesn't isolate. And that leaves us with A, create 6 VLANs. And VLANs provide logical segmentation at layer 2 of the OSI layer. And, letting the network administrators separate, they separate devices into multiple broadcast domains is how it works on the same physical infrastructure. So it's not physical separation or isolation, it's logically done on the same physical hardware. Question 23. A security engineer runs a vulnerability scan on a server. The scan results indicate that the server is not vulnerable to a specific CVE. During validation, the engineer confirms that this is the case. What term best describes these results? A. True negative. B. False negative. C. False positive. Or D. True positive. All right, so the key phrases for this one, I would say there are two of them. The first one's going to be not vulnerable. And the second is going to be during validation, the engineer confirms. So what's happening, right? The scan says the server is not vulnerable, and based on findings, the engineer confirms and agrees. So let's go ahead and do the process of elimination. We can start with D, true positive. And this is when a real vulnerability is correctly identified. So in this case, nothing was correctly identified. Next, we can eliminate C, false negative. And this means a vulnerability exists, but it was missed. And finally, we can eliminate B, false positive. And this is when the scan flagged a vulnerability that didn't exist. And the key here is that nothing was flagged at all. And that leaves us with A, true negative. And true negative is pretty much when a scan, in this scenario, is when a scan correctly indicated that the system was not vulnerable and that it was confirmed as not vulnerable. Question 24. A security analyst is reviewing logs to determine whether traffic was allowed or blocked, including details such as source address, source port, destination address, and destination port. What type of log file would typically contain this information? A. SIM. B. Firewall. C. NetFlow. Or D. Threat intelligence feed. Okay, so the key phrases here are traffic allowed or blocked, and I would say log file. This scenario, it pretty much points directly to traffic filtering, right? So let's go ahead and begin the process of elimination. We can start by eliminating D, threat intelligence feed. Now this gives context about threats, indicators, or actors, but it has nothing to do with log files. Next, we can eliminate C, NetFlow. And NetFlow, that includes source and destination IPs and ports, but it lacks details about whether the traffic was allowed or blocked. And finally, we can eliminate A, SIM. SIM, also known as Security Information and Event Management, that collects and correlates logs, but doesn't generate them. That's key, right? It may, contain log data, but it's not the original source for the log. It's just a tool used to aggregate them and visualize them, but the logs come from other resources, and that's important for this question. And that leaves us with B, firewall. And firewall logs specifically, record things like connection attempts, ports, IPs, whether traffic was allowed or denied based on configured rules. And firewalls also produce firewall logs based on this data. Question 25. A security analyst is reviewing a vulnerability report for a high priority application server. They want to determine the potential risk of a specific vulnerability based on how the organization's infrastructure is set up and used. Which section of the report is most likely to provide this context? A, risk score. B, risk matrix. C, mitigation options. Or D, affected systems. Okay, so the key phrases for this one are vulnerability report and impact of a specific vulnerability. So this scenario here indicates the report tells us how serious the vulnerability is given how the organization actually uses the system. So let's go ahead and do the process of elimination. And we can start with D, affected systems. Now, affected systems, simply put, right, it tells you what's impacted, but not how much it matters in context. Next, we can eliminate C, mitigation options. And this will explain how to reduce or fix the issue. Now, it's useful, right, but it doesn't evaluate risk. And finally, we can eliminate B, risk matrix. And a risk matrix that gives a general sense of severity, but doesn't consider how that vulnerability plays out in your specific environment. And that leaves us with A, risk score. And a risk score that factors in things like asset criticality, exposure, and also likelihood. This is important, right? It helps you understand how risky the vulnerability is in your actual setup. And that's important. Question 26. An organization confirms that its public-facing servers were compromised by malware, resulting in the exposure of sensitive customer information. Which of the following actions should the organization take? A. Notify impacted customers with a statement prepared by the public relations team. B. Perform forensic analysis before deciding whether to inform customers. C. Contact system administrators to silently patch the vulnerability. Or D. Begin internal audits to determine if any compliance documentation was missing. All right, so the key phrase here is exposure of sensitive customer information. So if you don't know what's happening, this scenario is indicating that there's a confirmed breach regarding sensitive information. So let's go ahead and do the process of elimination now. And we can start with C, contact system administrators to silently patch the vulnerability. Now, this will address the root cause, but it ignores the impact on the affected customers. Next, we can eliminate D, begin internal audits to determine if any compliance documentation was missing. So this is pretty much a long-term response step. It doesn't, address the immediate like issue at hand. And finally, we can eliminate B, perform forensic analysis before deciding whether to inform customers. This will pretty much delay the notification unnecessarily. Now, forensics is important, right? But customer notification should happen pretty much in parallel, not after. And that leaves us with A, notify impacted customers with a statement prepared by the public relations team. This is so important. And oftentimes this is ignored in the industry. And yes, I'm looking at you, Meta. It's important to know that transparency and timely disclosure in a situation like this, it will help mitigate reputational and regulatory risks. Question 27. A security team is preparing for future incidents by developing standardized procedures for handling specific scenarios. Which of the following is a valid use case for an incident response playbook? A. Creating a project timeline for security tool deployment. B. Outlining how to properly handle and retain evidence. C. Implementing BIA. Or D. Coordinating vendor contract renewals. Okay, so I would say that the key phrase for this one is specific scenarios, right? So we're looking for a use case that fits within the scope of an incident response playbook. And that means actionable steps during a real incident. So let's go ahead and do the process of elimination. And we can start with eliminating C, implementing BIA. And this is a risk in like continuity planning task. It's important, but it's done before incident response planning, not during an event. Next, we can eliminate D, coordinating vendor contract renewals. Now, this falls under procurement and vendor management. It's totally outside the scope of a response playbook. Has nothing to do with it. And finally, we can eliminate A, creating a project timeline for security tool deployment. This pretty much is strategic planning. So it's a strategic planning activity. It's not something you'd include in a response guide. And that leaves us with B, outlining how to properly handle and retain evidence. It's critical for maintaining like chain of custody and ensuring evidence is, admissible if legal action is required, right? But this is all part of the incident response playbook. Question 28. A security analyst is reviewing a system that cannot implement multi-factor authentication due to a legacy application constraint. A compensating control has been applied in its place. Which of the following statements about compensating controls is false? A, they provide similar protection when required controls aren't feasible. B, they remove the need to revisit the original control later. C, they must be documented in a risk assessment. Or D, they are often temporary due to technical limitations. All right, so the key phrase here is just simply compensating control. All right. I would also say it's important to highlight the word false. We're looking for the false statement, the one that misrepresents what compensating controls are supposed to do in this question here. So let's go into the process of elimination. And we can start with A. They provide similar protection when required controls aren't feasible. This is true. Compensating controls, they are designed to provide equivalent protection when the original control can't be used. Next, we can eliminate C. They must be documented in a risk assessment. This is also true and very important. They must be documented and tied to something like a formal risk assessment so they can justify their cause. And finally, we can eliminate D. They are often temporary due to technical limitations. This is also true. So compensating controls, they are usually temporary. And they are designed to fill the gap until the primary control can be applied. And that leaves us with B. They remove the need to revisit the original control later. So just because a compensating control is in place doesn't mean the original requirement just disappears, right? So you're still expected to implement the required control when possible. Question 29. A security analyst needs to scan a web application for vulnerabilities using an open source tool. Which of the following is an open source web application scanner? A, Burp Suite. B, Scout Suite. C, Nikto. Or D, PackU. Okay, so the key phrases here are web application and open source tool. So it's important to know that we're looking for a tool that is both open source and focused on web application scanning. All right, so let's go into the process of elimination. We can first start with D, PackU, and now it's open source, but it's more for like AWS exploitation for the whole AWS framework. It's not for scanning apps. Next, we can eliminate B, Scout Suite. And Scout Suite, that's designed for like cloud environment assessments, but not web applications. And finally, we can eliminate A, Burp Suite. Now, Burp Suite is widely used for web app testing, right? And it's considered the industry standard, but it's not open source. And that leaves us with C, Nikto. And Nikto is an open source web server scanner that is command line based, and it helps with detecting outdated software, insecure files, and things like misconfigurations on a web server. Question 30. A security analyst is investigating suspicious activity on a web server and identifies several entries in Windows Event Viewer that suggest malware may have been installed. Windows Event Viewer is an example of which type of security event indicator in this example? A. Timeline. B. Packet capture. C. Logs. Or D. Threat feed. All right, so the key phrase for this one is Windows Event Viewer. And I would also say event indicator, okay? So essentially, we need to identify the category of data Windows Event Viewer provides when tracking signs of possible malware infection. So let's go ahead and do the process of elimination. We can start with A, timeline. And this refers to like the sequence of events, but it's not a raw source of data. It's more of a way of like organizing the information. Next, we can eliminate D, threat feed. And this provides intel on known IOCs, which stands for indicator of compromise, usually from things like external sources, not internal system event records like Windows Event Viewer. And finally, we can eliminate B, packet capture. Packet capture involves network traffic analysis, which isn't relevant here since we're dealing with like a system level tool like Event Viewer. And that leaves us with C, logs. Event Viewer contains system and security logs, which are one of the core types of like security event indicators that are used to detect all different types of like malicious behavior. That wraps up this practice exam video. If you're enjoying these types of videos, be sure to subscribe and also check out my other videos for other exams that I cover. And like always, let me know in the comments when you pass. And until then, good luck and have fun.